Hey everyone, welcome to the Quick Draw Podcast with the Ornery Young Guns. I'm your host, Mike, formerly at Ornery Young Guns. With me is my co-host, John. He is at Kemuri Hidioku. Kelly, our producer and other co-host, is not with us tonight. She had a family thing that she's taking care of, so we wish her son a happy birthday because that's what she's doing. She's going to be really mad at me because I didn't shave today. Like the one show I didn't shave for.
Oh, that's why she's going to be mad. Okay, that's not
well, and also it's going to be a really cool show. So, you want to tell us what we're going to be talking about today, John?
All right, so today we are going to we have with us our guest, No Slack Delta. We are talking about the communists that managed to infiltrate West Point. His last name was Rapone. I forgot his first name already. I literally had it in front of me.
That's good. That's where he should be. Forgotten. Never to be remembered in the annals of history.
So No Slack has basically been the one person on Twitter who's actually been following this and reporting on it. So just tell us.
I wouldn't say one, but I'm one of the only public ones.
Few.
Kurt Schlichter has been. He wrote an article on it, and there's been other articles on. It's not Twitter, but like popular military stuff like that have done articles on this. But yeah, I know Ted Cruz tried. No, not Ted Cruz. Was it Rubio? Rubio spoke up. Yeah, he spoke up about it, but I think he got silenced pretty quick because him speaking up about it might have interfered with whatever investigation they had going on. Mm-hmm. And so he said a few things and then went quiet real quick, and I think it was just because of that.
Okay. So what do we know about this guy? Like, just give us a brief synopsis of a bio of this douchebag.
So Spencer Rapone, from Western Pennsylvania, as far as I know, he joined the Army as an enlisted soldier. I think it was around about October 2010, and he did some pretty high-speed stuff. He went through the Ranger Indoctrination Program, or whatever the hell it is called these days. I'm not sure. It was called something different when I got out in 2007. And he served in the Ranger Battalion, which is a pretty high-speed unit. And, you know, it's not something to, like, turn up your nose at. But he served in there. I think he did one deployment with the Ranger Battalion before he was kicked out. From what I could gather, this is kind of like second and third hand accounts from people who served in unit with him, was that he was kicked out for basically being insubordinate and questioning a lot of the leadership decisions, stuff like that, and that's not something you can do when you're in uniform. And so
right.
he was either kicked out and returned. He was because when you're kicked out of Ranger Battalion, you don't like get kicked out of the Army. You're returned to a regular infantry unit. So it's like a bit of a lower level, but you're still, required to serve. So he was sent to the 10th Mountain Division in Fort Drum, New York. And see, it was either from there or now this is what happened. The reason he got kicked out and the reason his captain got pissed at him is because he was trying to get a slot to West Point, which I didn't know you could do at the time. I didn't know you could go from enlisted, like, E4, lower enlisted, to requesting a slot at West Point. I thought you had to do that right out of high school, but that apparently is not the case. And so what happened is I think he went behind his CO's back when he was denied permission to do so. And that's what got him sent to Fort Drum. But something had happened and it had gone through. And so he didn't spend that much time at Fort Drum, and then he started at West Point in, I think, 2012. And from there, it's weird because one of the biggest surprises of this story is that he was not a communist before he went to West Point. He was not a communist until he was about 2 years deep into his 4 years at West Point. So he was radicalized there.
Wait, so we know for a fact that he was not a card-carrying democratic socialist, Marxist, communist,
No.
Nothing.
From his Twitter profile, and it was me and a bunch of other anonymous people who wanted to remain anonymous who were DMing me and going through his entire timeline, like all the way back to 2010 and 2012. He was a Ron Paul supporter in 2012, the year he started in at West Point.
That's a bit of a leap.
Yeah.
Ron Paul.
Yep.
Karl Marx.
There's apparently
where's the in between there? Like,
I don't know.
Everything.
There was apparently one influential professor there who he had gone on a trip to India with. I'm trying to find out what exactly his name was, but this is speculation. We're guessing was one of the ones that had turned him onto communism, like full communism. This is like pretend Marxism. It's just full communism.
mm-hmm.
But that professor had been recently suspended.
And this is a professor at West Point.
Yes.
Okay.
And it was never like West Point mentor who. Okay. Yeah. Let me try to find the name here, but yeah. But that was the biggest surprise because that's a bigger deal than just like some commie infiltrating the army and trying to do his little long march through the institutions by himself. If a guy is radicalized at West Point, that's a huge deal.
Well, and you almost have to wonder if has this professor tried this before,
right? And yeah, there was a complaint made by I think Lieutenant General Robert. I think it was Robert Heffington. Let me try to find it. Who actually lodged a complaint against Rapone for insubordination while he was at West Point, and it was it was in 2015 that Heffington wrote this memorandum and explained all this stuff that he was doing, and it was kind of swept under the rug at West Point. Cool. And I mean, I know Marxists and communists have infiltrated universities all over the country in last 50 years, but West Point is one place I would not expect that to happen.
Well, I mean, I guess any place there are professors. I guess the very fact that he got suspended tells you that West Point is still somewhat resistant, because it's not the only place a professor would get suspended for showing Marxist viewpoints.
But what I want to know is, okay, you have West Point Academy, right? It's a very prestigious school.
Yes. Right.
But still, help me understand. It's still under the control of the military, right? Or, like, who runs is there a board of trustees? Like, how is that managed?
It's a good question. I think it's still run by the Army overall, but I don't know what the upper leadership of that is.
Okay, so in theory, it would report to the Department of Defense, correct? DoD.
Department of the Army, probably, I think.
Okay, Department of the Army. Okay. Yeah. So who's the member of the Department of the Army or the Pentagon or whoever that's saying, shut up, we don't, is it somebody who just doesn't want the blowback of, shit, we let a communist in? Or is it something more nefarious? Like, what's going on there? Why is it that every time somebody files a complaint, it gets pushed under the rug?
That's a very good question. The only thing I can think of is because I don't think like the higher ups are. I'd be surprised if they were communist or even Marxist, but I would think that the cost of sending someone there, or giving someone a scholarship to West Point, or spending all this money training this soldier, because it's a lot of money.
How much is it?
I don't know exactly. I don't even know if I came across those exact figures, but it's probably a couple $100,000.
Okay.
So you don't want to lose that investment, and that's why they might not be so eager to kick him out or kick out the professor or bring bad publicity on the academy. Okay,
so if it's probably typical military bureaucracy. We don't want to get caught with shit on our boots.
Yep.
Okay. So what else do we know about this guy? So right now he's outed, right? We know everyone knows he's a communist.
Right.
So what has been done, or what's being done? Do we know?
The last that had privately been passed on to me on Twitter was that he was undergoing an investigation, and even in units that he were not related to what he is in, but were stationed at Fort Drum, you were not supposed to talk about it. people would joke around about it for a little bit, and then I think some word came down from higher up that said, "Shut up! Don't talk about Rapone. Don't mention it." Only because I think they don't want anything interfering with the investigation. However, I have recently noticed that from when this happened, and I think it was around last September, end of last September, until maybe a week or two ago, he had kept his Twitter account private. And was, basically locked down. And then within the last week or two, he has made it public again. And what that says to me is that it appears that the Army is not going to do anything about it.
Has he made any communist comments or pro-Marxist comments
yes,
since?
He's still doing all that. He has a disclaimer on his bio that says, all opinions or comments of this are mine and not of the DOD or Army. But that's not acceptable, I think.
Oh, we'll just have some fun with him.
Yeah, I'm sure he'll lock it down again once he gets into this podcast.
Oh, I'm sure he will.
Yeah.
Okay. So I mean, so the number seems. So John, thanks for looking that up. It's about $250K, which I did not know it cost that much to train an officer. That's like how much it costs to train a doctor.
Right?
Holy shit.
They get a free 4-year college education, and it's a good college.
So, right.
Okay, I found the name of the advisor who was suspended, Rashid Hossein.
That doesn't sound troubling at all.
Right? No.
History. Yeah,
Hossein no red flags with that name, none whatsoever.
Hossein was Rapone's mentor. The two had apparently traveled together to India in 2014, and that's about the time that, if you look at Rapone's Twitter timeline, where he started to turn and post more radically far leftist ideology. And before that, it was mostly like WWE wrestling and maybe a Rand Paul Paul. Yeah,
Ron Paul,
like libertarian stuff, and then. And then around 2014, just something turned, and he started posting communist stuff. And
what's in India? Like that just seems.
It was some trip they took. I don't know where in India it was, but it was some.
And was it just those two, or was it the whole class?
I don't know. It was
okay.
No. If it was more than those two, it was only a few other people. But there is, I don't think I ever took screenshots of this. In Rapone's feed, but there was another guy in the Army who I think he might have gone to West Point with, who was also a communist and was open about it. Because these guys they'll call themselves democratic socialists,
right?
And
like Lenin did.
A member of the Democratic Socialists of America, but he's full communist, and there's no hiding that.
Well, yeah, as a picture he got caught out in the open with, saying communism will win, kind of pretty much tells you.
Communism, yeah. And so, yeah.
And I guess it's kind of a troubling thought because, we already see this kind of sentiment in the education system writ large. So
right.
The idea that it's now seeping into military education is kind of really troubling, actually, because, at that point, what is that? How do you? Because you have to ask, how do you get rid of this stuff?
I don't know.
Well, I was gonna say to your point, John. Nosak, how old are you?
I'm 35.
Okay, so you're about our age. So we all went to high school at the same time. Like when I was in high school, if you called someone a commie as like an insult or a joke, like the understanding was, okay, don't take it seriously because you're not really a communist, because nobody's a communist because communism is bad, right? Like it's a joke insult because nobody in their right mind is a communist. And now it's like people that are coming out of high school are like, socialism will win. And you're just like, are you fucking serious? Like, did you just say that? Like that chick, the chick that tried to get Ted Cruz to say it as a cheese for a photograph. She's like, say socialism will win. He's just like, it's not going to. Shut the fuck up, kid.
Well, and I have a cousin actually who I hope is watching, but who knows. He lived in Berkeley for several years, And I always just tell him, of course, I would never live there because I'm not into hurting people. But thing is just that, you know, he told me about, because the Communist Party of USA is pretty thick in Berkeley. And he used to tell me I'd like to just go to their meetings just to laugh at them. But like, but it's amazing how being a communist in certain parts of the country is considered perfectly normal. I mean, like the very
That's
fact
what
that
bothers me a lot is that I don't know why it's still socially acceptable to call yourself a communist when it is not socially acceptable to call yourself a fascist.
right, well, because and here's the thing, because I've got friends.
There's really no difference. It's like Mussolini socialism versus
right
Marxist, or I guess Soviet socialism. Like it's still socialism.
They've taken up this line that says for sure that how dare you say, because I have a friend on Facebook who very recently was saying, she's just like, well, how dare you try to equate fascism with socialism? It's like kind of right in the name. But, the thing is just that, but I think that's why, because again, for the same reason my mom will always say, like, I can't believe that the Democrats could have someone in their party that openly runs as a democratic socialist and nobody bats an eye. And it's just like, and yet somehow, even though they're openly willing to be called socialists, they don't like it when you then start equating that socialism with certain forms of socialism. Like, I don't know if you've noticed, because there's a Socialist of America, something like that, on Twitter, that whenever you connect socialism to, or even communism, to obvious communist dictators like Pol Pot, and like Stalin, and like especially the South Americans, Che Guevara, that kind of thing. They're like, no, that was all capitalism, according to them. That's what they actually are arguing. So basically, what they're trying to say is socialism will only be socialism when it looks like what we say it's supposed to look like.
Right. Which is bullshit.
Never succeeded is not the same as never tried. There is such a thing. There is such a thing as failure to launch. But that brings up a question then. So, like, is this a big deal? Because a lot of people will, especially people in blue counties, and the bluer like bastions of Twitter, will say, "So what? The Cold War's over. We're not at war with communism. We are at war with one communist state, which is North Korea." I love how people act like this is a new thing. It's like the Korean War didn't end 15 years or 50 years ago. We just said, okay, we'll stop shooting at each other because we're not getting anywhere. Like nobody's dying fast enough. Like that was it. That's all we did. Now we're just going back to, well, maybe we should start shooting at each other again.
Right.
There's really they'll argue we're not at war with communism, that it's McCarthy is they'll drop the McCarthyism bomb. Never mind that McCarthy was right.
Right.
And so what do you say to that? Is this a big deal? And if it is a big deal, why? Why do we have to worry about this?
It is for two reasons. The fact that he did what he did at his West Point graduation is like unconscionable. It's like everyone who goes into the military, even down to the lower enlisted, knows that you do not advocate for political beliefs or ideology while in uniform. And so for him to put up that communism will win thing it really highlights how arrogant and petulant he is. Also the fact that like he tweeted out, it was before and after that, really disparaging comments about General Mattis and President Trump after President Trump was president. And so that's fine. Like ideally, I guess you would say that would fall under free speech. But in the military, you can't talk that way about your chain of command. That's insubordination.
Right.
And so all of these things together should have been enough for him to be kicked out of the Army. But I don't think it's going to happen. And I worry that I could understand if he had been stuck in a cubicle somewhere and made to just like do data entry for the rest of his time in and never had a chance for promotion and just had to spend, 6 years doing busy work because they didn't want to lose the money that they had put in to training him.
But isn't even that kind of a risk, because he could always put on pretend sackcloth and ashes and be like, oh no, it was, I was young and I was stupid and I should never have said those things, and secretly he's just like, ha ha ha, promote me to high rank and then I'll go back to being a Marxist piece of shit.
I think once you punch yourself in the dick like that, you can't.
But here's what bugs me about this, though. The thing is that, like you said, you're saying that to some extent they're not quick to want to discipline or go off on him because of the cost. But this is one guy. $250K is a lot, but it's one guy. Unless they think there's more than him. Well, then I have an issue. Okay, well that was my thought, is that they must think that there are more people than him, because the investment, while it seems like a big number for the military writ large, is pretty small for one guy. Unless you think there's a lot of them, in which case then you're kind of using him as a test case.
So based on one of the comments in the live chat here, I have to ask: is $250 for a second lieutenant? Is that like $1,000 for a hammer or a toilet seat?
I can't see that. Where is it?
X made the comment. He's like, "Have you met a second lieutenant? We are not getting our money's worth."
We call those butter bars because the second lieutenant has a gold bar, and they're fairly retarded. See, the problem is a second lieutenant is someone who just graduated college. So he's what, 22, 23?
And he outranks how many people?
Yes. And is really, because he's basically a private with rank.
Right.
So,
what you're saying is he's a flashy dick.
You gotta make sure that they're not like, sticking a fork in an outlet or, doing something dumb that's going to get themselves hurt.
See, this is why I'm glad that one of my veteran buddies turned me on to the Terminal Lance comic, because now I see this side of the things not ever having enlisted.
So you just have to make sure he doesn't hurt himself, but he's making twice what you are. So it's like, yeah.
Ooh. So and X also brings up another good point. We still bar Communist Party members from immigration. If you are a member of the, and I agree with that. I actually. We had X on a few shows ago to talk about immigration.
Yep.
And
that one.
We brought up an immigration plan that I came up with that tries to kind of solve both problems out of immigration, what to do with the border and what to do with immigrants that are here. And one of the things that I stipulate is, okay, if you are a member of the Communist Party, you can't come into this country, ever, at all. So, and apparently that's already policy. So if we don't let immigrants, and I mean, what's an immigrant going to do compared to
here's the thing.
A second lieutenant? Why would we bar immigrants, Communist Party immigrants, but not people with security clearance?
That rule has been in place since I think the 50s, but I don't think it's ever been enforced. I don't think anyone has ever been denied immigration because they were a member of a communist party or because they espouse communist beliefs. It's been this rule. It is still today on the books, but I don't think it has ever been enforced.
Does anyone even check? Because
yeah.
See, that's the thing, is I think nobody checks. So there'd be no reason to enforce it, because if you don't know, then you can't enforce it. And so, but that brings a nice
segue, kind of leading from just this one individual in a kind of precarious position of potential power to communism overall. We have the Communist Party of the USA. We have Democrat Socialists of America, we have the Socialist Party of America. Bernie Sanders ran as a Democrat, but he's a full-on socialist, right?
Make no mistake.
Democratic socialist. He says there's a big difference.
Okay, but my question is, so what do we? There was a time. And yes, people that be like, the Cold War is over. Blah. The 50s called. They want their foreign policy back. Yeah, fuck you, people. What should be done about communism in this country, besides free helicopter rides?
Well, it's tough because they control academia. Right. It's communist, but you have to really kind of break it down. It's all Marxism, and this is the problem I have. People say, "Oh, that wasn't real communism, wasn't real socialism." When you follow it back to its source, Marxism has always been about violent revolution.
Right. That's the basic fundamental preference.
And so, you know, it's they really control academia. I think the Marxist influence is a bit more subtle in media, but it's there. But like academia, if you just look at the social justice bullshit, that all comes from postmodernism, which is rebranded Marxism. When they realized that like Marxist economic theory might not be palatable for people here, but social Marxist theory is what all of postmodernism is based off of.
Right. You're basically, if you take away any kind of foundation for objective standards, that's kind of what the whole point of postmodernism is, correct? Like you're basically saying classicism, I don't think that's the right term for it, but classical thought was there is an ideal beauty, there is an ideal for art, there is an ideal for justice, there is an ideal for mercy. There's all these ideals for all these things that we want in civilization. And if we just think about it hard enough and try to be as objective and rational and logical as possible, we can first identify the ideal, what defines the ideal, and then we can identify how best to obtain it. Whereas Marxism says, fuck all that. It's all what you want it to be. Like that's the superstructure. Right. That's what those oppressive capitalists want you to think, so that they can have you running on the hamster wheel to obtain those ideals that are unattainable.
Well, right? Because forgive me for being the one Jordan Peterson fanatic here, but you know, the part of it being that because for the Marxists, all relationships are seen through the lens of power. Hence the reason they constantly use concepts of oppression, because everything is power. So therefore, their view of objective truth is that there is no objective truth. It's just the truth that maintains your power. So that being the case for them, truth is, and again, Hitler did this. Again, I know, one guy's law, that,
Godwin's law.
Godwin's law always comes up. But the point is, it's true. Hitler basically said, I can't remember, there was an economist who was telling him during his time that said, your ideas actually don't really make sense. They don't work. And he said, well, where are your stormtroopers? You bring yours, I'll bring mine. We'll see whose truth prevails. And that's the idea. Truth is who can enforce it on people the hardest. And that's
like Mao said, power comes from the barrel of a gun.
Right. And when everything in your view is power based, again, this is the root of feminism. Same idea that you can't have. They talk about equality, but they don't want equality. What they want is, they realize someone has to be dominant, so it might as well be women because it's their turn. It's the same thing with, any kind of Marxist ideology always comes down to that. Who has power over who? Because that's the only thing that matters to them.
Yeah.
Well, it's almost like there's this misguided, it sounds like there's this misguided belief that there's somebody somewhere out there who's never been born yet, who, if you give them absolute power, it will not corrupt them absolutely, and they won't abuse it.
Right.
And I wonder if that's where this time it'll work mentality comes from, because I was trolling the Socialist Party earlier today on Twitter.
Yeah.
And can somebody explain to me why the fuck, if you're a leftist, you can't meme properly? Like, it doesn't seem like a very hard skill to develop. I'm not a memeing genius by any stretch of the imagination, but dear God, their memes give me cancer.
It's something that goes beyond just memeing. I've noticed that when we were growing up, the people on the left were the funny ones, right?
Right.
Yeah, what happened to that? What happened to being funny?
I don't fucking know. It's weird. They just lost their power. Like Trump
became a minefield. Because again,
lazy, I think they got lazy and complacent, and now the left just sucks. They don't know. They're not funny.
Well, because they equate humor with agreement with them. So as a result, that's why do you think they're the funniest leftist comedians that are openly leftists aren't funny?
But that's my thing. Like, I can't, most stand-up comedy now, I can't watch, because it's like, this is dumb. It's who can be more outrageous. But it's like, well, you're just saying you're parodying the same thing another guy said in another stand-up comedy. He wasn't funny either.
Right.
You're just saying it with more swear words, or you're trying to be more offensive, and it's just really gay.
It's not even
It's
that.
not funny at all. It's like,
What
take
they
the
have
stick
to do
out of your
now,
ass.
they're playing by their own rules, and it's making it their craft suffer.
Right. Well,
they can't talk about certain things anymore. They can't talk about certain social issues or trans people. They can't make any, and so they're really limiting themselves of what they can work with.
right. Exactly.
And
That's what it's going.
it's just tanking everything.
Well, and then you have, what is it, Amy Schumer, where God forbid anyone play the drinking game of take a shot every time she says vagina. You know,
Right.
You kill yourself.
The problem with Amy Schumer is that even if she was funny, it wouldn't be her joke. She would have stolen it from someone.
Right.
So,
It's such a funny tweet with her too, because she used to be like so openly dirty, and like the joke with her was that she was a slut, and then all of a sudden there was one guy, I don't know who the hell it was, who
I remember that
made a joke about like how he spent the night with Amy Schumer because he took a picture with her on Twitter, and she lost her mind.
Oh,
and
right,
it's been
right.
It was a 15-year-old. It was a 15-year-old film critic.
Yeah.
And she started like bad mouthing his dad or something. Or no, she said, I think she cracked a joke about being with his dad, and he cracked a joke back, and then she got offended.
That's
I think
right,
that.
And she got all feminist on him, and it like was like, what the hell?
He was going to say
So,
slut shaming.
so David N, I think that's No Skirts, wants to know, is No Slack incognito on purpose? He's my fave Twitter follow, which I'm a little hurt by that, but okay, that's how it is. All right, fine. I mean,
a big rebranding right now, so
can't show your face. Not even happy? Okay, we'll go with that. I was going to say. I was going to say.
Getting banned does that. I will say this: when you're onto something and you like are actually making, you feel like you're making a difference, and Twitter just says "fuck you," you're banned. That is a kick in the nuts, and then you kind of get over it.
I guess I don't have to worry about that then. I was going to say, I make new accounts. It's not like I lose like what 500 followers. So I think I'm good.
Yeah, but it's not fun.
But this is a perfect example. Like, okay, nobody is talking about this except you and Kurt Schlichter, and maybe a handful of anonymous accounts on Twitter that are passing you information, helping you out. But outside of the military, right? And you're military, and Kurt's military, so you have those ties. Right. Outside of the military, nobody's talking about this. The media doesn't want to talk about this because they don't. I think America might say it's not a big deal if there's a communist party of the United States. They will say, but it's a big fucking deal if there's a communist in the military, especially ranking military.
Yes.
Which you would think would click something in people's brains, right? If I'm not okay, if I'm okay with communists, with my neighbor being a communist, but I'm not okay with my neighbor being a communist if I find out he went to West Point, like, that should tell me something about communism. There should be a little like a connection going on in my brain saying, maybe I should kick out all the communists.
So what? Yes, well, physically remove. Rotary aircraft is my personal.
That's why we've got plenty of helicopters to do it. So
right.
Well, plus going back to the whole, the cultural, how socialism and this kind of leftist kind of infiltrating the campus crowd. I almost think that in some senses, it's getting to the point where it's kind of starting to self-destruct, because remember part of the philosophy was deconstruction. If you remember Dr. Derrida, and the idea is deconstruct all the foundations, except you have foundations even if you're a leftist, and when you deconstruct those, then you will basically start eating yourself. And I think that's basically where they're at right now, because I still get a humongous kick out of the whole transgender thing, where they say, okay, well, we're going to eat away at the foundation of gender. And now 2 other movements they have are basically falling apart because of that, because they rely on gender being set. And that's the gay rights movement and feminism. You can't exactly say you're for women's rights if you can't define what a woman is. Being gay doesn't mean anything if you don't know what your gender is. So that being the case, we don't know what women are. Now we can't say pregnant woman because, well, men can get pregnant too. Okay, then we've lost we've lost the thread here, you know? And then it's like, I'm gay, I was born gay. How many years did they spend telling us we're born that way? Are you sure? Maybe, you know, a gay guy, I was born gay.
Maybe it's just a phase and you need to cut off.
Maybe you're just a woman. Maybe you're just a woman. Maybe that's why you feel like you like men. It's not because you're gay, it's because you're a girl. But no, we can't tell, because once you eat away the gender, once you eat away that foundation, you don't have one for those other two things. So I feel like at some point they're going to eat their own. They're going to eat their own foundations to the point where eventually.
Watching the left eat itself is my favorite.
It is so fun. The progressive. You remember the progressive professor? You know, who they were going to do that whole day without whites, and he said, "Well, hold on a second, that's racist." And they absolutely turned on him. This is the same guy who was.
You can't be racist against white people.
That was so great.
You know what though? What that does with, like, I think it was Brett Weinstein or
that's it.
Something like that.
It was. That's the guy.
It red pilled that motherfucker a little bit.
Right. Or Lindsay Shepherd for that matter. Same deal.
He went from, I think he was probably still he would call himself liberal. That's fine.
Yeah.
But it woke him up to the insanity that is, like, the far left these days.
Yeah.
All these purity tests, all this, like, social justice garbage.
And tests that change the goalposts.
No, so now I have a question for you. No, sorry. What role, if any, do you think the Trump election has had in kind of red pilling people, as far as, like, waking up and saying, "Oh, wait," because for example, I was never Trump. John and I think we all were never Trump. But our reasoning was that voting for Trump would not fix the issues that leftism had caused, that Obama's administration had caused, that the Bush administration had caused, that the Clinton administration caused. What our concern was is that people were grabbing on to Trump. And granted, we acknowledge out of a legitimate fear for what Hillary Clinton could do.
Right.
But all they were doing was swinging the pendulum the other direction, right? In terms of left-wing authoritarianism to right-wing authoritarianism. But that hasn't happened. I'll be the first to admit, I was wrong about what I thought Trump would be and what a Trump administration would be. And I'm glad. It's like one of the few times I'm happy to be wrong about what I thought would happen. But what I want to know then is, did Trump have something to do with that, or what role do you think that he played in people actually waking up and saying, "Holy shit, it's not about Democrats versus Republicans. It's about people telling you how to live your life versus people telling you to leave you the fuck alone"?
So it wasn't so much Trump. It's the reaction of the left to Trump, especially the mainstream press. Because I think before Trump's election, we all knew that they leaned left, at least, like most of them. And you know what? I will give leeway to Fox News and MSNBC, because even though they try to they have this pretense that they're fair and balanced, or they're lean forward or whatever, you knew Fox was right and MSNBC was left. Now you knew CNN leaned left though, but you didn't know that they would go batshit crazy like they have.
Right.
It's funny. My parents always joked around when I was a kid, and I never understood it until I was in college. But my parents, they'd call it the Clinton News Network, and I'd be like, "Ha ha ha! You guys are, we're a Republican family. We don't like the Clintons. I get it." And I mean, even at college, because I went to BYU, right? BYU is a conservative, predominantly Mormon college, right? Maybe 25, maybe, I think I'm being generous here when I say 25% of the faculty is Democrat, okay? Like, that's unheard of. That's unprecedented in academia, okay? It's usually the other way around. Like, it's a complete inversion of what you would expect in a modern university. I mean, classes start with prayer. We incorporate religion into just about everything in a way that's not dogmatic or like anti-science or anything like that. But it's actually a very healthy spiritual environment where you also learn about whatever it is you're studying. but it's a very conservative school. And then you go into and you go into like economics classes, and you have this class called American Heritage, which talks about the founding from they call it the creation myth of America, which is the perspective that the founding was divinely inspired. Okay. And it goes so far as to say, look, you don't actually have to believe in divinity or believe in providence or believe in the divine hand to kind of look at the founding from this perspective and understand how it's molded and shaped, our laws and our policies and our government. And yet this same school that does all that, that's like rah religion and rah the founders and rah the Constitution, says, yeah, by the way, you should still read the New York Times and watch CNN because those are the most balanced. And I had professors that would teach about the invisible hand, and they would teach about God, and they teach about religion, and they say, but you should watch CNN and you should read the New York Times. And I'd be like, I can't connect these. I can't connect these two things. My brain would just blue screen of death in the middle of class. I just like.
I think maybe it's that I didn't notice it until now, because like when the Clintons were in power, I was what? When was Bill Clinton? When was he sworn in? 92. I was 10. I didn't pay attention to this. And so I think maybe this stuff has been going on for a lot longer. But I read one of the most kind of eye-opening books I've read recently was Andrew Breitbart's Righteous Indignation.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, it should be required reading for everybody on the right, because he had been seeing this stuff that I thought I was like noticing this like around 2014, because of my first introduction to like kind of all of this. It started with media not corruption, but bias, and that was Gamergate. Mm-hmm. And I was never big into that because I'm not a huge gamer, but what I saw was really obvious, blatant bias in gaming journalism, and they weren't even trying to hide it, and it was just the way they were trying to present it was so like, who do you think you're kidding with the lies you're trying to tell here? And then that kind of moved on to, it really picked up at this election, and I had thought, the earliest I had thought that Trump had a really good chance of winning was Brexit. Mm-hmm. When I stayed up, because my wife is English, and so I couldn't even begin to try to understand the ins and outs of British politics, because the parliamentary system is weird to me.
Yeah.
It's very confusing. But when I stayed up and watched this Brexit thing win, when all of the polls said it wasn't going to win, I was like, this kind of feels familiar. And that's when I first thought that, like, Trump, I think, might have a good chance of winning. I up until election day, I thought Clinton was going to win, just because, the New York Times said she had a 99% chance of winning. But it's
I will admit I was pleasantly surprised, because I didn't want to have a hand in him winning, but I didn't want her to win either. So I was kind of in a tough spot. It was a huge vindication for, I think, me and a lot of other people that voted third party to say, that's awesome. Oh, we got the best of both worlds. We didn't have anything to do with him winning, so we can like shit on the liberals all we want. And she didn't win, so we can shit on the liberals all we want. Yay!
Plus anybody who was telling us that, all the people who had said, if you don't vote for him, he's gonna lose. No, he didn't. Obviously, we were right. Yeah. So, but the other thing. Oh God, what was I going to say now? But what was I thinking of? I mean, for starters, yeah. I think Trump's real contribution, and this is basically what you were saying, Noslak. It's just that it's not Trump himself; it's the reaction to him.
Yes,
and people who were leaning left, like center leaning left, got kicked violently out of the left, because again, you got the Dave Rubins, the Lindsay Shepherds. Lindsay Shepard's case was really quite eye-opening. Now, even though it was in Canada, it's still a big deal that she I listened to the audio, like all of it.
Yeah, I did.
And I was just like, holy shit.
It was like the Lindsay Shepherd thing was like when you were listening to the audio, it was like it felt like an attempt at brainwashing, and also
like a tribunal.
Gaslighting.
It was
brainwashing and gaslighting.
You guys remind our audience what's the Lindsay Shepherd thing?
I'll let you explain.
That was the at Wilfrid Laurier. It's a university in Canada, and she basically put she put a video in her class. It was about grammar, and basically it was about the transgender argument between Jordan Peterson and I forget the guy's name, who's a pro transgender professor guy. And she presented it neutrally, and in the I call it tribunal, they basically said, it's because you took a neutral position that we have a problem. You're supposed to say Peterson is Hitler, which they more or less said during this whole thing. That, it's basically like Hitler. And it's like, really? This kind of reaction, though, this is what has driven people to really, and it's actually quite polarizing, because there is no middle ground. Like Dave Rubin, he figured that out very quickly. You can't be a centrist in this setup. You either are on the left or you're on what they would consider the right. At that point, there is no middle. There is no center. You're either on the left or you're not. And they've gone so batshit on this one that people are starting to really ask themselves, do I really want to go that far? Because if you're not willing to go as far as they go, then they'll attack you. And again, you can claim to be a leftist, and they'll say, if you're not willing to go all the way, full ham, we hate white people, men are evil and rapists and blah blah, then they're gonna kick you out. So, and this is all in reaction to Trump. Look at the fact that Ben Shapiro was pointing out when he went to Berkeley, it cost him $600,000 in security, and he said just the year prior he'd gone to the same place and said the same things, and there wasn't so much of a problem. Yet a year later, people are trying to kill him. It's just. It's gone nuts, and I think it's polarizing, and I don't think that's Trump's fault. We were kind of headed here, but here we are.
It's funny because I remember reading that Lindsay Shepherd thing and thinking this feels like an excerpt out of like Brave New World.
Right. Yeah.
I really feel like I'm reading Aldous Huxley right now as I read this, and like this is bizarre.
Right. That was God. It's just like. I was just sitting there. It felt like like a Nuremberg thing or something, or just.
Which that's a good question. Animal Farm, Brave New World, 1984. Like these are all good books to read. They're considered classics. The left, I think, touts them, right? Like the left said, or at least their authors. They say their authors are worth reading.
They don't tout Animal Farm because Animal Farm was a. It was against communism, that book.
Okay. But I mean, you could leave out, theoretically, you could leave out Animal Farm. If you read 1984 and you read Brave New World and Brave New World Revisited, like you get an idea of what communism is like. Or at the very least you say, okay, wait a minute. I mean, that's my question. How are people not connecting these two things? Are we not reading these books? Is that the problem? Or do we need to like encourage people to read more books and say, hey, this is happening? Do you see this anywhere?
I think it's deliberate, or that just the left is really this stupid.
Little column A, little column D.
Yeah. I often look at them like, how can you not see what you're saying here is as authoritarian as what you're trying to fight against?
I think, honestly, it's not even that they are authoritarian, at least not that they think. I think what it is many leftists don't consider that what they're trying to do requires authoritarianism. Their entire appeal is emotional. So it's, well, why wouldn't you want to do this sort of thing? Do you know what it would take to do what you're saying? Well, no.
Right.
Okay, that's the problem. I think a lot of leftists generally.
But then you try to reason with them and like show them logically, okay, you're here, and it's just a few logical steps to go from where you're sitting to, mass graves behind the chemical shed. Like you can't get from point A to point Q before they block you, or just go blah blah. You're a Nazi troll.
Right. So and that's basically it. You're a Nazi. You're a hater. You're a, I don't know, white supremacist or whatever nonsense it is. because they don't want to hear that they're anything other than noble. As I like to say,
Right.
and dare I get a little race specific here, but especially white leftists like to engage in what I like to refer to as self-flagellating autofellatio.
Yes.
So it's that they're too busy whipping themselves and sucking their own dicks to figure out that, dear God, wait a minute, it is, because it's them thinking, I'm the most wonderful person in the world. Slap, slap. It's like, I'm a white person. It's so terrible. And then it's like, on the other hand, but I recognize how terrible I am as a white person. Aren't I wonderful? Don't you need me for everything? And don't tell me that you don't, because that makes you a race traitor. So you're supposed to love me. And it's like, no, you're really not that great. You're not that special. Go away. Like Antifa,
Right.
We're anti-fascist. Everyone's anti-fascist. Nobody likes fascists. You're not that special. How dare you tell me that? I'm against fascists. If it weren't for me, there'd be Nazis everywhere. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Being anti-fascist means nothing if you're a communist at the same time.
Exactly.
It's like they forget. Mussolini and Hitler and Stalin were all buddy right up to the point where Hitler said, I think I'm gonna screw Stalin. Like,
right.
Like that was the only thing about it. Like it wasn't like Stalin had this epiphany, like, maybe this global utopia that I'm trying to create is a bad idea. He was just like, oh, that guy stabbed me in the back. Well, fuck that guy. I'm gonna go work with the Allies, and then I'm gonna get East Germany. That'll teach him, that bitch.
Well, that's the thing is, Hitler hated
lover.
Hitler hated the communists, not because he disagreed with their ideology, but because he saw them as a Jewish front. Everything international to him was a Jewish front. So it was, no, it's not national socialism, it's international socialism. Yep. You can't have that.
And what's funny is Mussolini could not stand Hitler.
No, he couldn't.
Like, because of obsession with Jews. He was like, God damn it, this Hitler guy, he will not shut up about the Jews. It's do this, do that. I cannot stand him. Can we please win this war with the Allies so I can fucking take Hitler out and we can stop hearing about Jews?
Right. My favorite part about the leftists trying to co-opt the Americans who fought against Nazis in World War II is how they conveniently forget that a lot of those same Americans also fought communists in Korea like a few years later.
Right.
So they're like, they think that all these these brave World War II heroes would be on their side. No. And I like to remind them, like, no, they would hate you as much as they hated the Nazis because you're filthy communists.
Well, and also I'm pretty sure, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think we do a little bit of history revisionism when we talk about fighting the war, World War II, to end the Holocaust, because at the time we thought the Holocaust was a myth. We really did. I mean, we're not denying the Holocaust here. The Holocaust happened. But at the time, the rumors of the atrocities that were happening in places like Auschwitz were rumors. We couldn't verify them. We didn't know that they were actually happening. And we honestly thought, well, maybe this is just pro-war propaganda to get us, angry and into the war. And it wasn't until Pearl Harbor and we said, okay, these totalitarian douchebags have gone a little too far. We're going to slap them around like a little bitch. But my understanding, and if you read FDR's comments on the war, if you read like Winston Churchill's comments on the war, like the Allies' perception was, no, we're not here to save the Jews. I mean, that was an outcome of winning the war, but we're here to save Western civilization. We're here to end totalitarianism. That's the whole point. That's why we got to kick Hitler's ass, is because if he wins, then so does totalitarianism, so does Marxism, so does all these evil, ideologies, and we can't. And freedom everywhere will be eradicated because of these assholes.
Whatever it was the Japanese were doing.
I mean, World War II was about authoritarianism versus classic liberalism versus freedom. Like that's, and we didn't know anything about the Holocaust until after the war. After we kicked their asses and we opened up the camps and we said, "Oh my fucking God, what the hell is happening here?"
It was true. It's like, oh God, the rumors were true.
So we got 5 minutes. We got 5 minutes left. No Slack. We got somebody in the live comment section that wants to know if you can address the Victor situation.
Oh God.
I don't even.
No, I feel genuinely bad because I used to follow him and I used to think, oh, this guy seems kind of insightful. He seems to know what he's talking about. And then as I started listening more and more to what he said and more to what people were saying against, I was like, this guy's a fucking lunatic. He's schizophrenic, I think.
Yeah, Victor doesn't know what he's talking about. When it comes to military tech, like he can he writes good threads when he's doing foreign policy and politics and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. When it comes to military technology, he has absolutely no idea what he's talking about. He for some reason thinks that the Saudi Special Forces are the best military unit in the face of the earth. I don't know where he got that from. It was probably from the average American military soldier telling him that he's an idiot and doesn't know what he's talking about. But yeah, beyond that, Victor. He's got a huge following on Twitter, so it's
bit of an ego.
It's tough because if you call him out, you're like calling in like a shitstorm.
Yeah, that's usually how it works. So that's what we need. We need legions of followers and minions who will do our dirty work for us.
So yeah, Victor is just Victor, whatever. I guess I don't know.
All right. Well, we appreciate you coming on the show, No Slack, and kind of illuminating some of the stuff that's been going on with this communist in West Point. Where can people follow you if they want to get more information or learn more about that?
At NoSlack_327 is probably a good place to start.
Okay. And you've been working with Kurt Schlichter about this, correct?
We've had conversations on and off on Twitter DMs and stuff like that, but we haven't collaborated like that.
Yeah. I'd be interested, because this. And Kelly, our producer, has some background and experience with this kind of stuff, investigative journalism, things like that, which is why really, it sucks that she can't be here tonight because she has a real eye for this. Right. So maybe when she gets back from her break on this weekend, we'll have her reach out to you guys, and you guys can exchange notes, because there's this. It's $250,000 in taxpayer money. That's being squandered. I mean, this isn't a case of, like you said earlier in the show, about a second lieutenant who's just a private with shiny brass on the shoulders. This is an enemy of the state that we paid to and trained to be in the military, and we're training him military secrets and how to kill and strategy and all that fun stuff. So that's not something we should be spending money on, and it's a little upsetting that, one, that it happened, and two, that there are parties that are interested in covering up, whether out of ego or their own agenda. We don't know, and that's what I'd like to know. I'd like to know who's saying, "Shut up! We don't want this out in the open."
It's in our interest to make sure that we don't look like we're letting our military being run by Justin Trudeau.
And I think that's fair, right? We don't want. But nobody wants another Manning situation. Nobody wants another Snowden. So I appreciate what you guys have been doing to kind of bring this to light. I hope somebody in the media picks it up. But I know if Kelly were here, she would tell you just be persistent. That's kind of the trick, based on her experience. And I can't tell too much about what she's done because she won't let me. But we appreciate you having on the show. We will be posting a link for those of you that missed the live stream, and if you did, well, you should feel bad. You're a bad person. You should watch us next week. Follow us at @ornery_opinions, and follow No Slack, like he said. Follow John and follow Kelly. And you guys have a great night, and thanks again, No Slack, for being on the show.